whatever. How's it going, guys? Give me just a second here. Okay, so I'm not really sure where to start here. There's a lot to say. But let's start with the good news. I saw something on the internet, I think yesterday. Let me know about the audio, to you guys. 24 hours. What? It's been spotty lately. So I saw something on the internet yesterday that really gave me hope. Because one of the things I've been saying about this totalitarian takeover is that one of the only hopes we have is that the police would lay down their shields, right? That's happened in a couple of countries where when the government, the dictator, whoever tried to order the people, or the cops and soldiers to do whatever terrible thing to the people, they just laid their shields down. And in LA the other day, the LAPD was refusing to assist ICE when the crowds turned on them. And that is huge. That is absolutely huge. And what you saw was, the handful of ICE agents in a line holding onto each other for dear life with this gigantic mob surrounding them, right? And that is the best image that I have seen in years and years and years and years and years. And the thing that it really made clear, the most important message there, was actually about democracy and fascism, right? Because if you have the people of LA in a supposedly democratic country, right, they pay taxes so that the federal taxes, so that if the feds need to help them because they've asked for it, then they will come and enforce their will. They will send public servants to come and enforce the will of the people. That's what they have paid them for. They did not pay them to override their will. So if you have federal agents in Los Angeles and people, including police, are not only refusing to do the bidding of these federal agents and federal powers, but they're putting their bodies on the line, they're putting their freedom on the line to defend these immigrants. So what are the feds doing there? That's not the will of the people. The people wouldn't be out there in the street protesting and fighting cops if it was their will that those immigrants were removed, right? So it doesn't matter where you stand on this. It's none of your business if you don't live in LA. You don't live in LA, it's none of your business. But apparently the majority of people are willing to actually put themselves in harm's way to defend those immigrants. So the feds have no right to be there. That's fascism. That's not democracy. Period. End of story. There's no way around it. Done. Done. So what's really going on? That I feel like that's a major, major point that people need to pay attention to. It doesn't matter what you think. This isn't about your politics. It's about the will of the people in those places. They don't feel those families should be torn apart. Fuck off. None of your business. Furthermore, we have to talk about the ethics of immigration in the United States. Because the reality is that the empire of the United States had its artificially inflated wealth mostly derived from exploitation economies that they've maintained around the world, Europe also, England in particular, right? The Americans and Europeans have been standing on the backs of brown and black people, including children, that are making all of these cheap goods and providing all of this cheap fruit and vegetables and all of these cheap, crappy things that you don't even need, really. Children, slaves, child slaves, still happening today. Elon Musk profits from child slaves and had people believing that he cares about their tax money, right? If he was really ethical and cared about people, don't you think he would eliminate child slavery from his supply chains before he worried about your tax dollars? Like, it's so obviously not what that was about. But to do that to people for centuries, and when they tried to rise up, when they found a strong leader like Gaddafi in Libya who was providing free education, and if his country didn't provide the education, you know, you couldn't take a certain PhD course in Libya. They would pay for you to go overseas. You know, maternity leave for women was long and paid really well. You got paid a huge amount of money for having a child. Healthcare was taken care of. Housing was taken care of. He pledged that him and his parents would live in tents until every single Libyan had a house. Every Libyan did not have a house when he was assassinated by the United States. His parents were still living in a tent when that happened. They painted him as an evil dictator. And you know why? People talk about a currency that he was going to establish in Africa, and I'm sure they didn't like that. But the real reason is that they didn't want to be embarrassed. They didn't want the United States population to find out that their system was not the best for serving people. They didn't want the American people to find out that a communist nation was doing incredibly well. And people were getting dividends from the oil that Libya, I mean, it's, you know, I wish I'd memorized the entire list, but it's insane what that man was doing for those people. And that's why they killed him. Like, can you come up with a better definition of evil than the United States government? It's the synagogue of Satan. All around the world, anytime a country started to employ a system that rivaled the United States, CIA, sabotage, destabilize, you know? Meanwhile, US citizens, arrogant, gloating, entitled, traveling to other countries and treating people like shit in their own countries. You know, and then when the people that they have been held up by, that they have been propped up by to live lives that those people couldn't even imagine, can't take it anymore, and they come to the United States seeking refuge, you're sending them to Guantanamo Bay and a death camp in El Salvador and slave labor camps in Libya and Syria or something. People in the US need to realize this is who you are. You know, and ignorance is no excuse. People act like, oh, well, we don't know, or what are we supposed to do? Here's the reality. When they dropped nukes on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the United States citizenry should have dragged them out of their palaces and drawn and quartered them in the streets, tarred and feathered them. The fact that they did not makes every single American citizen complicit in an atrocity. And I understand that people, you know, you grow up with something as normal and you just accept it as that. But that's no excuse at this point. Americans have become well adjusted to a sick, despotic, evil culture. And the cause and effect, the karmic consequences are coming home to roost right now. And it is true that it's not our fault, a lot of us, you know, the younger generations. We're not boomers. If we're not World War II generation that did nothing when their government nuked Hiroshima and Nagasaki days apart too. They saw what it did and did it again. Everyone's complicit. You know, and the things that I've seen on the internet today in terms of comments from like Trump supporters, when he announced he's sending thousands of immigrants to Guantanamo Bay, not for crimes, but just for illegally being to Guantanamo, to a terrorist death camp. Like 85% of the inmates there died before they got a trial. And under the Patriot Act, most of them aren't even entitled to a trial. And I looked in the comments on TikTok and a couple videos where they had announced this, and the number of people that are like, good, this is what I voted for. Every one of those people belongs in Guantanamo Bay, underneath the Guantanamo Bay. Every single fucking one of them. I'm just praying that a lot of those were bots, that they're government bots, you know. But I know they aren't all, because somebody in our community that's been around forever said something really similar. Right before I started the stream, I saw the comment. And I had posted that, you know, if people are out protesting because they don't want the immigrants taken and families destroyed and innocent people sent to Guantanamo Bay, whose ancestors held up the United States and suffered so they could have, you know what I mean? So they could have the lives that they had. And he said that that's like saying that Republican cities can bring back slavery. Excuse me, motherfucker? Like, what? Does this dude really believe that? Is his mind that warped and poisoned that he thinks that people exercising empathy and compassion and tolerance of their own free will is somehow commensurate with bringing slavery back? Is that really where we're at this point? Guantanamo Bay? I mean, I can understand saying, you know, well, if people aren't here legally, we should send them out. I am totally admit that having people just randomly pour over the Mexican border, considering that the cartel's been around for, what, 40 years now, and there are kids that have grown up, like, playing soccer with heads and stuff, like, that could be part of the minions pouring over the border. That's not good. But guess what? Who bought all those DUR, you know, DRUGs that sustain those cartels? So what, you think the aftermath of that should stay in Mexico? You did it. You did it. You created them, but you don't think you should have to deal with them? I hate to tell you this, but the universe has other ideas about shit like that. You know what I mean? It's time to stop the dumb fuckery, people. I appreciate that, JD. Somebody just randomly asked about psychedelics and remote viewing. Absolutely. I think the best evidence for that is from old anthropological records from South America, where on several occasions, anthropologists and explorers reported meeting a shaman that could drink ayahuasca and then describe the pyramids or the Eiffel Tower. In one case, it was supposedly a specific street corner in China that was known to this person. And there's a couple different theories about this. One is that they're just creating it's like a feedback loop, subconscious feedback loop. Like if it's true that the filter in the nervous system is reduced, you start picking up thoughts of the people around you. I know 100% that telepathy in ayahuasca circles is absolutely, certainly, definitely real, 100%. Absolutely, no doubt about that. So if the anthropologist or the person talking to the shaman knew about the pyramids and the shaman couldn't because he'd never left the jungle, there's no TV back then, whatever, you know, it's still possible that he got it from the mind of the other person. But what I actually think from being an ayahuasquero for a decade is that at really high doses, like you have to really, really, really be able to maintain your focus that way, way out there in order to do this. But at a certain dose, you are completely separated from your individual vantage point and you become part of the field consciousness. And so you can navigate around in it. And you have to be able to like maintain your electromagnetic integrity, you know, of your sidereal body or however you want to think about it in order to get to the point where you can do that. But that's my feeling about it, is that's how that happens. So, you know, just to kind of get back on track of the subject, because I think this is super important. You know, at this point, I'm feeling really fired up because I'm realizing the level of brainwashing and evil that we're contending with. You know, like I have friends that are MAGA. I don't know if they're MAGA really, because when I say MAGA, I think like people that think Trump is a prophet, and no matter what he does, he's perfect, and that he couldn't possibly have committed any of the 26 SA allegations, you know, despite the fact that the victims report exactly the same stuff, and you know what I mean? They're like the same style, what he would do, and you know what I mean? Like those people. But I do have friends that are Trump supporters, you know, and I say a lot of shit about MAGA, and I mean it, you know, but yesterday I was thinking they were trying to do the right thing. You know, they believed that Trump was an anti-deep state entity, and they believed that he was going to get rid of some of the evil in the world. So I was really trying to come at it from that point of view, because what we need is unity, right? But then after seeing all these comments today, like, you know, that guy in our own community that was saying that tolerating immigrants is the same thing as letting red cities bring back slavery, and, you know, people talking about, I saw one where there was a recording of a little girl crying, "Please don't take my mommy," as the ICE agents were dragging her away. And the comments, people were just evil. I mean, it's just unthinkable that these are supposed to be like the Christian moral family values party, you know? So I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, we have to have zero tolerance for MAGA. And I'm not saying that you need to become a Democrat, because that's just as stupid. They're going to do the same thing. You know, that's not the answer. And please don't misinterpret me. They're owned and operated by the same people. If you look at the political plays, right, you can actually see them punting things back and forth. Biden did flood the United States with illegal immigrants under orders, right, to set up what Trump is doing now. There are bigger players above them that dictate everything to them. They are not in charge. And if you have doubt about that, all you have to do is just ignore the political rhetoric of the puppet of the moment and look at every meaningful metric, the trajectory of every meaningful metric. And it has stayed the same. This shit didn't just happen. We didn't just like blink and arrive here. This has been methodically been staging for decades. You know, this is not new. And every little piece that has been put into place has happened regardless of blue or red, blue or red, blue or red. That is not the solution. Is not the solution. And people don't understand that this is not trolling. I'm not being antagonistic. It matters. It matters because when you go out in the street and yell, "We got to get that racist, grapist Trump out of the White House," and then you want to vote for a guy that had to drop out of the race with Biden because he said, "Come on, man, a clean, articulate, well-educated black man, you just don't see that," referred to little black girls as cockroaches, wrote racist legislation to put black males in prison as a solution to the unemployment problem, eulogized a Klan leader, calling him a friend and mentor, and who Kamala Harris said she believed all of his like 11 accusers, right? You know how fucking dumb you look? Saying we need to get this racist, grapist out of the White House so we can put this rapist, gracist in there. People got to stop doing that because it fuels the other side. They're like, look at these fucking idiots. You know what I mean? And that's why they do it. Why do you think they pick these guys? It's perfect. It's perfect to fuel the fires of division. There is a reason that US presidents increasingly are the biggest douches they can possibly find. That is what qualifies you for president of the United States. You have to be the most spineless, moralless, amoral, fucking puppet, you know what I mean, possible. That's how you qualify. And probably also allowing them to put you in some kind of situation where they can blackmail you. You know? This whole thing about Trump being an enemy of the deep state is so obviously bullshit at this point that it is embarrassing that there's a single person left on earth that still believes it. Peter Thiel, look at the shit this guy has said in the past about using AI to control humanity. You know, and some of the other billionaires that he's got around him. How can these MAGA people say that the billionaires are the deep state that are doing all this evil shit, and then Trump hires them all to create surveillance programs and $500 billion AI thing, and you know what I mean? And they're still like, oh yeah, we were totally right about this guy. It's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever witnessed in my life. You know, the idea that this guy's gonna go get all the child predators when there's 2 10-year-old boys, 2, I think, 11-year-old boys, and a whole list of people from 13 to 26 that he settled out of court with. There's recordings of him talking about going into the dressing room of underage girls and saying, I can get away with this stuff. Didn't deny it. He's proudly bragging about it in an interview. Paris Hilton is hot, he said. When I saw her, I said, she's so hot. It was on this radio show. It's on Stern. It's on Howard Stern. She was 12. You know? And here's the thing. This whole thing about just denial in order to maintain your illusions, do you realize how much of a fucking coward you are if you feel like you need to do that in order to get through your life? You know, that's really what's got us stuck here, is fear. People on the left that don't want to admit that their people are just as bad, and that when they're in office, the same shit happens that happens when the red ones are in office. You know, the trajectory does not change. The rhetoric of the puppet changes. The rhetoric does not. Elon Musk said he bought Twitter to get rid of censorship. Censorship, compliance with government requests to take down posts, to censor information from the government, increased 30% when he took it over from the pandemic, when there was actually, maybe, just playing devil's advocate, legitimate reason to censor, if there really was like a major threat to humanity. So for it to have increased under him, saying it, free speech, you know, and all the other censorship, tons of censorship. Trump putting these guys in charge of Palantir, that, the things that, obviously deep state. Like, come on, you guys, you were fooled. There's no way around it at this point. And any sensible person that goes around to these like posts on TikTok and whatnot about the immigration stuff, and you see the evil in the comments that these people are making, and granted, we don't know how many of them are propaganda bots. But like that guy in our community that's thinking like that, I know he's real. He's not a bot. They're definitely out there. And it's absolutely terrifying. On the other hand, we have LAPD refusing to assist ICE. And the reality is, if their minions, their soldiers and police, just refuse to comply all of a sudden, it's over for them. It's over for them. And we do have, in this moment, the potential to have conscious, reasonable, enlightened, healed, psychedelic, leadership. We're in a position to have the best possible world in the worst possible moment right now, because that's how the universe does it. That's the formula. And the chaos and uncertainty of this moment, that's part of the formula too. The greater the threat, the greater the resistance, the greater the reward, if the resistance is overcome. So I welcome the chaos and the difficulty, because that is exactly what is transmuted into its opposite. That's the fuel. That's what death fuels life, life fuels death. That's just how the thing is made. Nothing we can do about that. But that's a very powerful tool to know that when you look out into the world or on TikTok and you see these people cheering on, like, that's what I voted for, destroying families and putting people in terrorist detainment camps and death camps, even if they didn't commit a crime other than being in the wrong part of the world. And guess what, you guys? Americans have all profited from their labor to a degree that's totally unfair, because your leaders are scum. And you've gloated about it, and now you're like, you are obligated to accept those people. Sorry. And when you find bad ones, you know what? Deal with them on an individual level. That's it. Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, was not up to something evil. He wasn't. The New World Order, under his conception, was not a bad thing. The whole point of it was that if there are no nations, who are you going to go to war with? Everyone needs to accept everyone. We need to have a brotherhood of man. You know, we are one consciousness, divided so that we can experience union. Get rid of nations, get rid of religions, because we do know the truth about our spirituality as well. There's a field consciousness, you know, that generates things by mirror symmetry, replication by reflection. It's basically etched into space-time by things called D brains, A brains and B brains. There are resonant geometric structures that are found at every scale of creation that compose the particles, determine their mass, trajectory, and arrangement. That's what the occult called the veil, that translates the ideal to the actual. You know what I mean? Like, we know what this is. The universe is here for the experience. We are one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. The same way that our life is about discovering ourselves and experiencing things, the macro scale of consciousness is the same. You know what I mean? There are limits to our knowledge. We'll probably never have a way of proving whether reincarnation is real or not. No matter what we think we remember, there could be a vast storehouse of memories that we all have access. You know what I mean? Like, you're never going to know certain things for sure. But we know enough that we don't need religion. We don't need division. You know, we know enough. And we've also observed, those of us that have found this truth, that there are reliable ways of exposing people to it without having to tell them anything, which proves that we're not indoctrinating them, that the experience is personal and individual and yet tells you the same thing. We know how to induce it. We know how to foster it. You know, it is possible to have an illuminated planet. All of the best systems for socio-economical structures and, you know, all that kind of stuff can be determined algorithmically. There's really no argument about it, whether capitalism or socialism or any of these things are the best system. There's an objective truth and it's easy to figure out. And there are countries that have put systems in place that are working way better than the one in the United States. And people talk about how, well, I bet they're not that rich and shit. They come see me a couple times a year, some of them. You know, they pay 55% of their money in taxes, but they make still $100,000 a year. You know, they tell you in the United States that those countries have shitty public health care. That's not what I've heard. I know the people. They're like, no, it's great, it's fine. They're all healthy. You know who's not healthy? Americans. Like, highest infant mortality rate, highest cancer rates, highest insurance premiums. You know what I mean? You're the only first world country left in the world that's dealing with this shit. And you're the unhealthiest, and you're still arguing that you don't want the healthcare system that is creating healthier people by mad fucking margin. And you can't even afford your health insurance that doesn't even cover, you know what I mean? To be free from the brainwashing and to watch Americans defend a system that is eating them alive, and guess what? There's nowhere else in the world I can find where people are that brainwashed. Repeat after me. You are free. You are free. You know? It's time to stop the fiction. It's time to shatter the illusion. And I've noticed, too, that there's basically two types of people left in the United States. Those that have figured it out and those that just make completely, like, Mad Hatter Tea Party logic from hell arguments. Like, they're so obviously completely insane that it's, like, mind-boggling that they could, like, lack self-awareness to the extent that this shit could come out of their mouths. But unfortunately, there's a fucking ton of them. You know? But I'm really thankful for the LAPD, man. I never thought I would say that because they have a reputation for being some of the biggest scumbags on earth. But think about that. Think about that. One of the most corrupt, fucked up police departments in the United States, probably in the world, is siding with the citizens and refusing to assist the feds. So what do you think is going to happen in most other cities in the United States? If LAPD this is beyond their decency, right? LAPD. Really, dude? Really? You know, and if you're still MAGA and you're watching the LAPD like feel like this is beyond them in terms of decency, that should be enough to make you stop and think like, holy shit, dude, I'm less ethical than the fucking LAPD. You need to examine your life. You know what I mean? I guarantee you this. Supporting any politician is your doom. Any politician. You support any of them, you're basically just unaliving yourself in slow motion. You know? So I'm not saying that I know exactly how to turn this around. I know how to play my role, you know, and try to help people elevate consciousness and see things clearly. And we still do have some pretty serious issues to resolve, you know. This whole thing with Elon Musk and Donald Trump falling out is pretty alarming, actually, because it supports my prediction that what's really going on in the United States is the consolidation of power into either a new single-party, uniparty situation or just to the right. I'm not sure which thing it's going to be, but as soon as Elon turned on Donald, which I think is total theater, he's like, maybe we need another party. I was like, oh shit, here we go, you know. And in case you're not aware, look up Technocracy Inc. and his grandfather's organization's plan to unify Greenland, Panama, and Canada with the United States. Sound familiar at all? Does that sound familiar at all? And get rid of democracy. Sound familiar? A little bit. And replace the presidency with a small group of technocrat, like basically dictators, committee of dictators. That sounds kind of familiar too, doesn't it? Kind of like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and that other guy, I can't remember his name, but he's in charge of Stargate, just as bad as the rest of them, right? It's kind of like this plan. Elon's grandfather is actually happening. And by the way, he was a Nazi enthusiast. That 100% was a Nazi salute Elon did. I get so pissed off when people are like, oh, he's just autistic and he doesn't get it. I'm autistic. I mean, Asperger's, you know, I'm on the spectrum. My partner's on the spectrum. 70 or 80% of our friends and clients are on the spectrum. We're not retarded. It's not that like that, you know. And even if you have Asperger's and you're the richest man in the world and you have a political position, you have handlers, advisors, you have people telling you, you know, how to act. I mean, to suggest that Musk didn't know that there's cameras from all over the world on him at that moment and that people had been saying that Trump was a new Hitler and all this stuff, that just slipped his mind and he just like twice, you know what I mean? Come on, people. Like, you can't be so committed to your delusions that you're like, what do you think that does? The people that play that game, what do they think they're doing? That's fooling anyone? You know, and here's the thing. On left and right, a lot of people live in their illusions because they're afraid. You know, and I empathize, but I'm not like, I have no tolerance for it anymore. You know what I mean? But your illusions will not protect you from the truth. You know, there are shadows, but then there is that which remains. Being delusional may make you feel better temporarily, but the sun's finna rise, you know, and its rays are gonna hit you. So my advice would be to just put down the cowardice and just face reality. It's that bad in the US, you know, it's that bad. And the thing is, the potential that this moment holds in terms of like, you know, bioelectric medicinal advances, AI, if used correctly, is definitely not a threat to anything. You know, it has to be, we have to have the right relationship with it. But it has empowered me and allowed me to educate myself in incredible ways. And we're in the early, you know, it's not the tool, it's the tool using it. The widespread acceptance of entheogens, you know, like there's just so much. that is only in danger because a handful of people are obsessed and determined to maintain their control and dominance. And there are a bunch of zombies out there that don't believe that they're zombies. It's a difficult thing to combat too because it's instinctual, you know. People, one of the most disturbing observations I've made from all of this over the last couple of years is that most people don't actually have values when it comes to politics. That's not what it's about at all. Because if their leaders change their narrative, they just act like they just never had these most fundamental values. Like I always talk about this one, but free speech on the left. That was a huge thing for us when I was like not a hardcore liberal, but I was glad they existed, you know. It was definitely like my side overall, I guess, you know, and we hated the right more than almost anything because of the censorship and they didn't like free speech. And then all it took was the Clinton and a couple of other Democratic leaders to say we need free speech to make us safe, and they're all like fine with censorship all of a sudden. You know, and right now the right is like apparently fine with censorship and totalitarian surveillance state, you know, with the Palantir thing, and you know what I'm saying? Like they just switch to whatever they're told they're supposed to think. And the reason they do that is not even like deliberate or conscious. It's just our instinct tells us that there's safety in numbers. So once you've identified your tribe, you have to go with their, you know, herd conformity. And it's a very difficult thing to combat because if people are holding cognitive dissonance or they're employing selective perception or any of those kind of, you know, related mechanisms of our cognitive apparatus, if you challenge any part of it, fight or flight kicks in. So you're not dealing with a reasonable person when you engage this. That's why the propaganda is so full of contradiction. That's why they imbue all of this hypocrisy into the narratives, you know, so that people are inculcated with these opposing ideas that create cognitive dissonance. So if you challenge either side of it, then you engage that fight or flight. And it also helps keep people in sort of like a quasi-panic state. And if, as Goebbels said, the Nazi commander, if you can keep people scared, you can get them to do anything. It also lowers IQ, right? This is why whenever there's any kind of cultural or sociological upheaval, they destroy the economy. You know, if there's an uptick in conscious awareness amongst the populace, they're going to destroy the economy. Because if they can keep you focused on the animal level, then you're not looking up skyward. High is the way, but all eyes are on the ground. The light in the way is something that they will only read about. By the way, you guys, do me a favor and hit the like button. And also, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe and turn on your bell notifications. My notify all is lower than the average on YouTube, or all notifications, and that makes me sad. So appreciate you doing that. And also join the Patreon. We're working through the Masonic Degree 16 right now. And even if you're one of those people that thinks that Freemasonry is evil, and you don't care about it, I guarantee you that if you saw this stuff, you would be amazed. And it also is really important that people realize how much propaganda there's been and how much the opposite of what most conspiracy theorists think Freemasonry actually is. I'm not saying there are no bad Masons or even no bad lodges, but still, it's pretty eye-opening to see what it's really all about. And I'm going to start doing them 2 times a week instead of 1. For patrons, because they take like a year to get through, and it's going to take us, I'll be dead before we finish all the degrees if I don't start doing them more frequently. So, and also you get access to like 6 years of premium material. I do consultations for various subjects from mysticism to sort of life coaching type of thing, and guitar lessons and whatnot. So we really appreciate your support because we're demonetized and also deprioritized because I tell the truth, and he who has the he who speaks the truth has few friends. One of my favorite sayings, and it apparently is very, very old and comes from a small African tribe. It's really, really wild to see how much everything is the same everywhere, all throughout history. But these patterns need to be disrupted to a large extent. You know, we have been deceived, exploited, manipulated, and the worst consequence of that, well, it's hard to say which thing is worse. Unnecessary human suffering, right? There should only be as much suffering on Earth, I guess I was gonna say the universe, but on Earth, as is unavoidable. We can do at least that well, and we are nowhere near it, nowhere near it. The other part of it is the missed human potential, the realization of human potential. You know, this is something that drives a lot of what I do because my parents were uneducated, severely damaged, and I realized pretty young that it was because of the misengineering of our system, basically. And instead of meeting my highest potential in my 20s or 30s or whatever, I had to basically deal with my childhood until, still am, really, but you know what I mean? It doesn't need to be like that. It doesn't need to be like that for people. We don't need to be raising a nation of narcissists. You know, boomers are like 40% full-blown narcissists, they say, and 70% of them have significant narcissistic traits, which means that they raised a bunch of narcissists, and it's not bipolar, it's borderline personality disorder is a product of narcissistic abuse a lot of times. You know what I mean? They're passing down this generational trauma. People are distracted, and they are traumatized, and they're confused and lost, and they are not reaching their highest potential or contributing to the degree that almost no one is able to fully realize their potential throughout their entire course of their life. And it doesn't need to be that way. We know how to do it, you know? Aleister Crowley, as much as people hate him, was petitioning the British government in the early 1900s to allow children to learn according to their own ingenium, right? And now, 150 years later or whatever, studies have shown that he was correct. You know what I mean? And the reason that they didn't do it is not because they didn't know he was right. It's because that's not their goal. They're not trying to bring the best out of humanity. They're trying to make a homogeneous mass. Another really important point, I think, I talk a lot about this sort of emergence of a new paradigm in science, really. You know, all this evidence of non-neural cognition, context-aware morphological adaptations, evidence for quantum consciousness. All of these things have implications that are pretty huge in terms of spiritual and metaphysical implications, right? Pretty huge. Why does that matter if there's a teleology in nature? Play devil's advocate, assume the mystics are correct, that there is no out there, you know, that in there is out there. If you remove purpose from nature and the universe, you have removed it from yourself. You cannot have a sense of purpose if you really believe that life in the universe is purposeless, right? And people that have no internal compass of their own, it's going to be set for them, right? This is why this abject materialism has been fostered and institutionalized. I said this the other day, but if you look at Pinrose's calculation for the chances that intelligent design is not at least part of the universe in terms of the possibility of a low entropy state, just that aspect of it, arising purely by chance, is 1 in 10 to the 123rd power. That's a number so large it would take like over 100 billion years to count to it at one number a second. We don't even have a word like, what is it? A googolplex is 100 zeros. We don't have a word for this number. It's so big. So the chances against there not being any kind of teleology or intelligence, at least, in the system, we're not talking about sky god, but we are talking about some sort of integrated intelligence, is such a massive number that we can't even conceive of it. That means that it's not true, you know? And yet, despite having been confronted with this for decades, the scientists will do anything to get around it, right? I mean, really think about that. If they were confronted with a probability like that in any other arena besides the possibility that there's some sort of intelligence behind the universe, they would dismiss it immediately. Like, obviously, that's stupid, you know? Think about that. Look it up if you don't believe me. And then if you start factoring in other things of like impossible levels of improbability and probability factors that are like, you know, close to that number, like the eyeball randomly developing on its own by chance in response because there were some photoreceptive cells that it just, oh, there's light there. So let me see, I'll just configure myself. I'm going to put these lenses, I don't know, right here and juxtapose so they flip the image, you know what I mean? And then we're going to send some optic nerves to this brain that just happened to, like, come on. If you factor in all those probabilities, the number gets like inconceivably huge. And that's the reason that they have stuck with it. You know, because if people are connected to the truth, they become sovereign, and that alignment with the trajectory of creation and life causes them to conduct themselves in a way that they don't need governance. This is why this knowledge was banned in Egypt, it was banned in Rome, and it's been demonized in the United States and Europe. Crisis of purpose is the main constituent that facilitates all of this evil. Fear and a crisis of purpose. And here's the thing too, if you realize, okay, if consciousness is a quantum phenomena, and I likely am not, death is not the end, then what are people going to be afraid of? How are you going to scare them and manipulate them? You know, if somebody is willing to fight for something that's righteous and they don't even think that they're really going to die if you shoot them or put them in a prison, so what? An entire lifetime in the grand scheme of infinity is nothing. The truth will indeed set you fucking free, you know? And we're in an incredible position to argue for this position right now, because with quantum consciousness evidence, non-neural cognition proof, and some of the other stuff, reincarnation, afterlife, even the idea of spirits are not incongruent with scientific theory right now. That is a fact. And I've heard major physicists, Michael Levin has said this, you know what I mean? This isn't some hippies, misinformation based on Dunning-Kruger interpretation of science. This is coming from the, recognized biggest, greatest minds on the planet right now, that they're all leaning towards some version of panpsychism, you know? Like, a lot of physicists are suddenly saying there's no way that life came from dead matter. There's nothing about that is congruent with science, right? Like, major physicists are like, that couldn't have happened. It never happened. Life, and a lot of these developments seem to be being suppressed too. Have you guys seen the video of Michael Levens, what do you call them? I think nanobots or something? No, they're not. He didn't call them that because it's already a thing. Maybe he called them nanobots. I don't know. They're dead frog skin cells that not only has he brought to life, like Frankenstein, like this man has, this man has literally brought dead things to life. And people, this is not major news. They're just skin cells. And there's a video of one of them solving a maze, and it literally like sprouts legs so that it can walk all of a sudden. It just has, I guess it like realized it had some loose cells, and they just stick out, and it starts using them as legs. And then it gets to a place and it realizes it went the wrong way, and you see it like stop and think, and then it turns around. It's got no neurons. It's just a bundle of fucking dead skin cells, and you see it stopping and like considering. And all he's using is electromagnetic fields somehow to do all this. And then they started making more of these nanobots, these dead skin cells, rolling them into balls, and then they would come to life too and go running around, And the yeah, see, people are like, what? Seriously, look it up right now. I feel like doing some screen sharing maybe, and I'll pull it up. I'm getting a message that YouTube isn't getting enough data, but that can't be true. So let me know if the audio's cutting out every other second. God damn it. Hold on, guys. Let me see what happened. Try to fix it. Yeah, of course, we get a good audience, and YouTube is like, oh no, we can't let this guy be saying this stuff to large groups of people. That's why I got demonetized. I had 20,000 people almost. And I started talking like this, and then they're like, nope, dude, you're demonetized for life. For life, too. Hello, hello? Yeah, that's weird. I don't know. The audio levels are low, glitchy. Check, check, check. There's no way that these guys were just guessing. I don't know why my audio is doing this. I have everything totally kosher. Is it still bad? Somebody let me know, please, in the chat. And latency normal. Let me try that. Is that better? Is it better? The other thing you can do is just go back a few minutes in the stream. Man, I can see I'm not getting a good signal. You can go back a few minutes in the stream and then just put it on 1.5 speed, and it'll fix the glitching so it's not annoying. Yeah, I can see that my audio is not coming through. Okay, how about now? Let me see my media source display capture. All right, guys, one last thing I'll try. Hold on, let me look at the chat and see if, is it better? Okay, it sounds good. Okay, that's good. Man, see, and in the time that it took me to try to address that, we lost 13 people. Yeah, so I mean, you guys get my point, I guess. I'm gonna have some coca paste because I've got a lot of work to do after I get off of the stream here. And if you guys would like to offer questions or any subjects that you would like me to weigh in on, I'm happy to do that for a bit. But yeah, man, we're there, you know, to seeing the LAPD laying down their shields. That was a really inspiring moment. That really gave me a lot more hope than I had. Because if the LAPD's sleazy, corrupt, evil asses, you know, if it's too much for them, then it's not going to be too much for San Francisco. It's not going to be, or, you know, it will be too much for San Francisco, New York. There may be some places like Arkansas and South Dakota that they're that fucked up, but is it the whole government? I don't know if it's the whole government, but I think in high places you have to you're not getting anywhere near the White House if you're not a piece of shit. You know, let's talk about Kamala Harris for a second. Forget about the fact that she, you know, put like 1,500 people in jail for prison while she was a prosecutor. I mean, for pot, in jail for prison. And then laughed about smoking weed herself in an interview. Forget about all the atrocious things she did in her political career. Forget about the fact that, you know, people say it's super insulting to say this and you should never say this about a woman and shit, but she did sleep her way to the top. It's all well documented. All of her lovers, you know, were always the people above her. I mean, and who cares about that? But I'll tell you what you should care about. She said that Biden was a rapist and a racist. And that she believed all of his attackers, right, or all of his accusers, all of them. She's a black woman. And a couple weeks after she made those statements, when she was picked, she said, "It is an honor to serve beside such a great man," right? That shows that she has less integrity than a pile of dog shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, if she had any human decency, she would have been like, fuck that. I'm not going anywhere near that. I'm not serving as VP with that guy. I just said he was a rapist and a racist on national television. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? It's just fucking hell. They're all pieces of shit. All of them. That's why they're put in that position. And most of them, I think, know what's going on, too. You know, they used Obama to get the trust of the left because they were kind of, you know, they were really not trusting of the government. And, yeah, they were kind of getting out of, they needed to send the sheepdogs out, you know. And so Obama's "I'm a cool black man" kind of vibe got their trust and made them bootlickers, right? And then they swung that over to draw the MAGA in, and then now they're going to try to create a single party out of, you know, now that they've gotten everyone all bootlicky, they're going to consolidate power in a single party. No, if Kamala won, it would not be any different. It would not be any different. But she wouldn't have won. They don't win. There's a reason that they swing it from red to blue when they do. It's got nothing to do with votes. I really don't think it has anything to do with votes. Every time there's an election in the U.S., the other side accuses the winner of cheating, and then the winner accuses the other side of undermining democracy just by saying that. But then they do it on the next election when their one loses. It's the most Hippocratic, moronical fucking thing I've ever seen in my life, except for everything else that the United States does. You know what I mean? And then we have the people that assembled or that created the machines admitted to rigging them for the CIA in other countries, but I guess the assumption is they wouldn't do that in the United States. And an 8-year-old girl or 11-year-old girl hacked the voting machine in under 8 minutes and changed the results. It's ridiculous, you know, and they have hired consultants, security integrity, election integrity consultants to come in and evaluate, and they said, no, this is not secure at all, you know? And if they wanted to, they could just make it blockchain. It's easy. The technology's been there for 20 years. What's going on there? They don't want it to be unriggable, you know? So this time they threw the election deliberately because it's way easier to do that than to rig it, right? Oh, Trump had already beaten, right, a woman who was a white woman. And if you're trying to sway Trump voters, and this guy's the evilest person in the history of U.S. politics, right? Are you going to experiment with running a black lady for the first time? Let's just see if this works, I guess. We're trying to defeat the ultimate evil, but let's go ahead and run a social experiment. And plus, since we're trying to bring in MAGA voters, and the last thing they're going to do is vote for a black woman that served under Biden, who they're convinced is like the ultimate evil, you know, they're almost sure we'll scoop those MAGA guys right up with this like evil piece of shit black woman. You know what I mean? It was the dumbest thing. And the fact that anyone thought it was real is super embarrassing. It was not real. They threw the election on purpose. She never expected to win. They never wanted her to win. It's just easier to throw the election. I don't know how you could possibly argue that it was just an accident or a mistake, or that they didn't have the technology to like use an algorithm to figure out if she could possibly win or not. You know, it's retarded. People just need, here's the thing. You're afraid of the truth, and they know that. So they can know they can feed you a stupid ass lie, And the fact that it's so stupid and terrifying and the things that it implies are so scary is going to encourage you, all the people, to act like they believe it, to function as if they believe it, even though deep down inside they know better. There's no way that makes sense. Come on, you guys. Like, how would anyone believe that they really thought that Kamala Harris was the person to run against Trump if they're trying to bring MAGA voters in? It's beyond stupid. It's obviously deliberate. Like, stop it. Appreciate you, Athena, being here. Because a lot of times if I'm doing, screen sharing or something, I can't see what's going on in here, and there can be idiots running their mouths, and I hate that. Did I see the Palantir deal? Yeah, I did. And it's like some kind of crystal ball that they use to surveil, manipulate, and like other shitty things. I don't know, in Lord of the Rings. And the guy that's running it is a total technocratic, totalitarian, use AI to control humanity person, And here's the thing, again, you guys, you have to think about the evidence. Do you really think that the Guantanamo Bay, right? He said he'd added all of this acreage to the containment part? What, in the last week? Because he announced this like right after he was elected. You think they really just put Stargate together all of a sudden? Like, that's the kind of thing that you've been planning for like a decade or more. You know what I mean? The idea that this is actually just, Trump, and that people fucked up by electing him and stuff, it's so obviously stupid. The fact that there is really an unseen puppet master, and the puppets are just reading different, screens with slightly different narratives on them, it couldn't be more obvious. The ace in the hole that they have, the trump card right now, is the fact that the implications are so terrifying for people that they really have an advantage, because people do not want to admit this to themselves. And so much, it's called identity addiction. So much of their self-worth is invested in their political indoctrination because it's passed down to them from their parents. So they have the sort of added weight of like the respect for your family and your parents and your community even. You know what I mean? This obligation to it. And then from your own also just predisposition, this identity addiction. It's almost like admitting that the Democrats are just another extension of the deep state, just like Trump, is like admitting that they are pieces of shit themselves, right? They come to identify their self-worth. This is why MAGA is so invested in Trump as well. If they admit that he's a piece of shit, then they feel like they're a piece of shit. It's really, the propaganda and the whole indoctrination, the system, it has so much leverage in psychology. It's really crazy. Hey, what happened? Do I have any opinion on full moons? I mean, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I know that crime goes up, and you know what I mean? Obviously, it does a lot of things. You'd have to ask me something more specific, I guess, in order for me to know how to answer that. My question is, what happens to America by 2030 when we're all slaves? Well, that's the thing. You can't have anything happen without it affecting everything else. It's not like the United States can just fall and we're going to go roast marshmallows in the flames. You know what I mean? It's not. Everything's too interconnected. So, like, self-sustaining communities in the jungle are pretty easy to create. The problem is that indigenous don't like outsiders really deep down inside. I hate to tell you guys this, but a lot of the plant medicine shamans and stuff that tolerate white people are doing it because they get paid. And if the lights went out, they would not do that anymore. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them. And a lot of the tribes have been stockpiling ammunition that they buy from the narcos in the jungles for a long time. And so just starting a vegan community and hiding in the jungle is not as simple as, it's just Uh, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I was down there at a vegan community in Ecuador, and they were trying to tell the Shuar not to hunt on their tribal lands. You can't kill animals, and they came with guns and beat them senseless. You know what I mean? Like, it's the jungle. So that's what I'll do, try to find some place where, the Shipibo are pretty tolerant. Some tribes are pretty chill and are likely to extend a hand, but you're going to have to be real careful where like, Shuar territory is probably not the smartest place to go. Warani are not going to put up with outsiders. But yeah, there are places in the jungle where there's fruit everywhere, there's plenty of water, there's medicine everywhere, there's psychedelics everywhere. The cow patties are like loaded with cubensis and pinales, ayahuasca, and you know what I mean? And the fruit is amazing. And if you are at the right elevation, it's not super hot and there aren't a lot of bugs. So it really can be paradise. But better have gats that blow the wall out and be ready to clear them all out like atomic fallout. That's just the world we live in, kids, Hopefully it won't come to that, but 50-50. Oh, well, Tenna, he's asked me where the paradise I speak of is, but the natives are hostile there. So, yeah, I mean, and I don't mean natives like that. I mean like the people that are native to the place. That just came out wrong. But, yeah. Anywhere in the Amazon that has an elevation, that the appropriate elevation, depending on, what I mean? You have to find it. You have to go and find it. But anywhere in the Amazon that's not like down in the bottom of the valley where all the bugs and heat are, you just got to go up a few thousand feet where it's like 65 degrees all the time and there's just fruit everywhere. And the thing is, like, I know the jungle, so I could easily survive in it. I know all the plants and stuff, and you got to know that too. You can't just eat whatever's around because some things are poisonous. By the way, speaking of all that, you guys, I think we still do have one more spot for July 11th through August 11th, and then we also have more space than that from August 23rd July 23rd until middle of August. So if you're interested in coming to visit, drink some medicine, explore some ruins, and then in September, we're going to the jungle. If you're interested in any of those things, shoot me an email. Our website is almost up where you can get kashuru, which is Andean algae that is an incredible superfood, wachuma, and other things I can't mention. So check that out too. It'll be up tomorrow, I guess. Putumayo region, I've never been there. Fed by the jungle itself? Yeah, my son actually could harvest enough probably to survive at like 18 months. He was not quite 2. I know that for certain. Hold on. I'm assuming you mean how often do I do the retreats? We're doing July and September, and that's it in the foreseeable future. Oh yeah, what I was saying is, um, my son, he would go out into we had a little circle of jungle in our yard, and he would go in there and come out with edible stuff that he'd seen me eating, I guess. He never picked anything that he shouldn't have eaten, which really blew my mind that young he was able to do that. But yeah, you can. One of the main food sources is actually a palm. It's like a small palm, like a bush palm. I don't remember what it's called. But when the shoots are young, that before they've opened, you just grab them and pull them out. And then they have a white section that can be like even that big around that is, you just eat it until it gets too fibrous and then stop and throw it. And they're everywhere. They're everywhere. You could survive off of those alone. And then there's cacao all over the place. And cacao fruit, which you make chocolate out of, is actually absolutely delicious fresh. It's not like chocolate. It has a white pith that actually tastes like a mixture between like coconut, pineapple, and mango or something. And it actually has the phenethylamines and there's caffeine, but there's theobromine, I think, and a bunch, all kinds of stuff. And if you eat the seeds, actually, they're full of protein. So that is an incredible food source, and it basically low-grade MDMA in it, you know. So you don't really get like super high or anything, but you feel really good mood, you know. Serotonin, pro-drugs in there as well, and let's see, what else is a really common one? Chantakurus are these big fat grubs. You have to cut trees down to get them. But when you do, a certain palm, the chanta palm, you get a lot of them. So you cut the palm down and let it sit for 6 weeks, and you'll smell this kind of like vinegary kind of smell. And you chop it open, and it's full of these giant grubs, and they're actually good even raw. And they do cure a sore throat. That's why they're called chantakuru, because they cure. The palm cure basically is what it means. And I had a terrible sore throat. I videoed it actually in my shorts. And the Quechua were like, "Oh, just eat 2 chantakurus." And I was like, "Raw?" And they're like, "Yeah, if you need it for, you know, illness, then you need to eat it raw." So I sucked it up and I ate 2 of them raw. It wasn't even that bad. And I shit you not, man, this was a terrible sore throat. It was gone in 30 minutes. 30 minutes, just gone. So that was wild. And then, you know, there's coconuts. There's all kinds of fruits that I never learned the names of. You know, I just learned to recognize them. And oftentimes I was walking in the forest with indigenous people, so I didn't really understand what they said. You know, they're like, "You can eat this, it's called a blah, blah, blah," you know, and I'm like, "Oh, okay," but I recognize it, and so now I know, you know, what it is. Mad honey, I wouldn't suggest that. Yeah, I'm American. How did I end up in Peru? It's a long story. I came to South America like 7 years ago because yeah, it's a long story. I have biographical videos on the channel if you want to know the whole story. But I've been called here since I was a child, you know, and I'm really fascinated with light and consciousness, and gold has a relationship to all that. So the fact that we were approaching these solar we were approaching the solar maximum and the Incan heritage here, it just kind of, that was really what kind of sealed the deal to make this our next stop. Yeah, the Outlaw Life series will tell you everything, almost, not really. Yucca? Yeah, yucca is also called manioc, and that's a major food source for sure. You can eat the leaves as well, but it doesn't really grow wild. It has escaped, you know, and you can find it on roadsides and stuff, but you're not really going to find manioc just like out in the middle of the jungle. Unless, you know, there are tribes that were like nomadic, and like the Warani, for example, they would go and set up a village, and they would stay there like 6 months, and then they would start sending people to go and plant and like put little foundations for their structures and stuff, and then they would go. But then some of the plants keep regenerating, so you do find little pockets in the jungle where there's like a really high concentration of edible food that it's not natural. In fact, some people theorize that the Amazon rainforest is really a garden. It's not natural, because it doesn't make sense that like everything is edible and there's medicine and drugs everywhere. You know, it's just a little bit weird. So people think that that's really why people moving around and planting things over centuries and aeons. Well, that's good to hear, Gates. I mean, you know, in a lot of ways, the United States is a wonderful place. Will I still be able to find love? I have no idea, man. Probably. It all depends on you. How is it possible to reincarnate on the same planet Earth when the possibilities are endless? Actually, there is a good reason for that, according to Plato. I mean, nobody really knows the answers to this stuff, and if anyone tells you they do, then they're lying or delusional. If they tell you that they think things, then you might want to listen to them. You know, it's like you can have informed perspectives or something. But anyways, the heliocentric theory of psycho, how do they call it? they had a word for transmigration of souls, I'm really pissed off that I can't recall this term right now. Anyways, the idea is that we come from the sun. We're light. Everything is light. There's only two things in the universe, light and vacuum. So we are basically emissaries of the sun god Ra, right? And that's kind of a dramatic way of putting it, but that's basically what it is. You know, every star is a projector, and they project their essence in the form of light onto planets, and that's what we are, basically. Our soul, S-O-L, S-O-U-L, is S-O-L with the U in it, right? An individual part of the soul, the sun. And so we're stuck in this solar system until we achieve certain status, I guess, and release certain attachments. And then eventually you move to a better universe. But that was the Platonic metempsychosis. That's what it is. That was the Platonic conception of metempsychosis. No, people do not speak English in Peru. I mean, there's some do, but mostly no. But yeah, I mean, that's the idea about reincarnating on this planet over and over again, is that you haven't gotten it figured out yet, so you got to come back until you do. According to I don't know if he was NSA, but he was definitely a national security high-ranking official of some kind that is claiming to be a whistleblower. I know his credentials have been checked. He's definitely really that. Whether we should believe him or not, I don't know. But he claims that we're all avatars of aliens, basically, that we're just containers for these souls that are playing like some kind of weird hyperdimensional GTA 6 Earth game or something. You know, I don't know what the point of that would be, but that's what he claims, that we are like avatars. And I had this really weird experience where over the course of a couple of months, 3 different people, when I was playing guitar, said they saw this like big white and purple geisha demon-looking thing hovering behind me. They didn't know each other. They weren't even in the same town, 2 of them. And then when I drank ayahuasca, I was presented with this image that I remembered from this vision I'd had many, many years before, and I realized it was the thing that people were talking about. And Pachamama says to me, "Would you like to know what this is?" And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "Well, it's you, in the same way that in, what is it called, where the thing is in 2 places at once? Anyways, a particle can be in 2 places at once, but it's not 2 things, it's 1 thing." She's like, "This is you as you exist on this gas giant that didn't become a red dwarf star in the Sirius system," and blah, 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 all this stuff, right? And so I didn't really take it that seriously. And like a week later, it occurred to me, 10 days later, I guess, it occurred to me to check online and see if the things that she had told me about Sirius were true. Or the red dwarf that didn't become or the gas giant that didn't become a red dwarf because of the influence of the other 2 stars, I guess gravitational. And I looked, and there was a paper that had just been published after the ceremony, like 5 days after the ceremony and only a few days before I looked it up, that said that astrophysicists feel like they had concluded that the 3rd body in Sirius was a gas giant that didn't become a red dwarf star, because, you know what I mean? It was exactly what I was told. And so that was odd. And then when I heard this guy say we're all avatars of these like alien creatures, I remembered that experience, and I was like, Yeah, superposition, thank you. Dude, there's plenty of clean water in Ecuador. Let's see. All right, guys. Well, I guess I'm going to wrap it up. It's almost 1 in the morning here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please consider supporting the channel. If you do not support us, then YouTube doesn't pay me. So the Dogon talk about the Sirius system. Yeah, well, I wasn't going to get like deeply into it, but the Sirius thing is a big deal for me. And after that experience where ayahuasca told me that my holographic soul counterpart or whatever was in that gas giant, she described to me the whole existence. You know, it was plausible but weird. Like gaseous invertebrates that are sort of held together by their electromagnetic field instead of a body, and just all kinds of weirdness. The weather, the way we would think about weather, she said it's like more like acidic conditions and like chemical reactions and stuff than heat and cold, the way they would experience it. And a few weeks later, I was talking about this on a stream on YouTube, and someone in the chat was like, yeah, the Kofan claim, not the Kofan. God damn it, I can't believe I've forgotten. The Sequoia. Who were 2.5 hours away. I ended up going down there a short time later in Cuyabeno, which is amazing jungle. You have to go everywhere in a boat, you know, like it's all underwater in a lake with little rivers connecting everything, the villages and whatnot. And we fish for piranhas there. There are so many piranhas in the water. As soon as you throw something in the water, it's all, you catch one, you know, terrifying. But anyways, the tribe in Cuyabeno claims that they communicate with these beings from Sirius when they drink ayahuasca. And so after I'd already had that experience and I found out that that was like a thing in the jungle, I was like, man, that is just really odd. And then also the Blue Star and the Blue Lodge of Freemasonry is Sirius. And excuse me, the Hopi. The Hopi have the Blue Star prophecy, right? And both the Freemasons and the Hopi have like secret knowledge that they identify other keepers of the knowledge with secret handshakes. And they both have this connection to Sirius, right? And then the Dogon had accurate star charts of the Sirius system like 75 years ago or something. And God, there's more. There's a bunch more. The Sirius mystery is crazy. Yeah, the blue and red star. That's why there's red, white, and blue stripes. Or the flag is red, white, and blue and has stars on it, they say. Cheers, guys. I appreciate all the kind words tonight. But I am going to get off because I'm hungry and it's late. So thank you so much for being here. Please consider supporting the channel. Shoot me an email if you want to come to the retreat. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for Eliphas Levi.